So the third and final part of the lecture is going to be about that second half of the relationship we talked about way at the beginning of the lesson, which is when behavior influences attitudes. When the way that you act comes around to influencing the way that you think about things or believe. One of the things we're going to talk about is dissonance theory. So cognitive dissonance is a state of unpleasant emotional tension. The state of unpleasant emotional tension, dissonance, tends to be greatest when our attitudes and behaviors match least. That is, when we kind of feel that we're hypocrites. If we believe or say that we believe we hate smoking and smoking is bad and smoking is not good for our health, but then we're also still smoking, it ends up causing a tension, an emotional tension between knowing or believing one thing on the one hand and doing or saying something on the other hand, and the two don't match up. So the state of cognitive dissonance is greatest when our attitudes and behaviors match least. In terms of cognitive dissonance, there was a really interesting experiment by Festinger and Carl Smith that illustrates how this works. Now the thing with cognitive dissonance is, to create this unpleasant state of emotional tension, you can't force someone to do something. You can't make them do it. Because if you're making or forcing someone to have a particular attitude, if you're saying you have to say this or you're going to be in trouble or this thing will happen to you, then it's not really voluntary. And this doesn't then tend to work. It has to be induced compliance, or the person has to feel, if it wasn't 100% their idea, that they're at least going along with it. And when you have this state of sort of voluntary espousing of particular attitudes, you're going to have a situation where cognitive dissonance can be developed. And Festinger and Carl Smith basically showed the less is more effect. That counterintuitively, the more you give someone in terms of material goods like money for espousing a particular attitude, the more they might actually then report not enjoying the activity. So you would think, oh, you give someone lots of money and they're going to love the thing most. Actually, what Festinger and Carl Smith found was that by giving a small amount of money, they actually got more attitude change than by giving a larger amount of money. So let's take a look at what the experiment looked like. So basically, what they did was they had people come in and do a horrible, horrible, boring task. They were basically spinning knobs and moving pegs and things that were really boring, and they had them do it for a very long time, like an hour. And then they said, hey, my graduate assistant hasn't shown up. I have people in the waiting room who are going to be doing this particular study, and I need someone to tell them about it, but get them all excited to do it. People have to be really excited to do this task for it to work. And they said to half of them, we're going to offer you $20 to go out there and lie to the people. And they offered the other people, the other half, $1 to go out and lie to the people. Now, they had a control group that wasn't asked to go out and lie, and the control group reported liking this thing less than 0. They thoroughly hated it. So this was a really lousy way to spend an hour. So it established there was no liking of this particular task to start with. What they found out was that the people who were paid $20 pretty much were at 0, not really reporting necessarily liking doing the study, but the people who were given $1 when surveyed later actually reported liking the study much, much more. So what had happened? Well, basically the people paid $1 were in the high dissonance condition. They knew the experiment was really boring and dull, but they had gone out there and lied. They're now in a state of emotional tension. I did this thing that I know is really boring, but now I'm saying something else, which is, hey, this thing is great. So those people, under a situation of high dissonance, had convinced themselves there must have been something worthwhile about the experiment anyway. You know, there must have been just something I got out of it, something I learned. It couldn't have been a complete waste of time. Whereas the $20 people, you didn't find this. They were in a low dissonance condition. I said that I said that I really liked the experiment, but I didn't really like the experiment, but I was paid $20. That's why I'm doing it. They didn't have any emotional attention. They had $20 and they knew that was the reason for why they were doing things. So with cognitive dissonance, you will find that dissonance is strongest and attitude change is largest when we have very weak reasons for engaging in a behavior in which our attitude and behavior is very, very different from each other. So this is sort of the strongest dissonance condition. I'm paid $1 and I really hate this particular study, but I've had to go out and tell people that I liked it. Dissonance is going to be strong and you're going to get the largest attitude change. Whereas less is more, I had 20 bucks and that's a really good reason for lying, so that's kind of why I lied. I understand why I did the behavior. Well, dissonance is weak and you're going to get a much smaller amount of attitude change. This is also where you can get the less is more effect with children. There was a study where children were brought in and half the class was told, you know what, you do the best drawings that I've ever seen. I'm going to give you 50 cents a drawing for the drawings that you do. And the other half of the class was told, you know what, you do the best drawings that I've ever seen. Can you do some drawings for me? I would really appreciate it. So in one case, the kids are paid for their drawings, and in the second case, the kids are just told the guy loves the drawings and hey, could you make me some more? What you end up finding is that with the children, when you rewarded them with money, they did a lot more drawings. These kids were pumping out drawings left and right. They did a lot more drawings initially. When the researcher came back a week later, however, the kids who were paid to draw, who had done so many drawings initially, now did hardly any as compared to the kids who had done it for intrinsic joy. So part of the less is more is giving a reward that doesn't interfere with the intrinsic motivation, the internal reason for why kids are doing things. When the reason becomes extrinsic, like, hey kid, I'll give you $20 an A on your report card, the kid ends up not necessarily really caring for the activity or doesn't have to. They only feel that they're doing it as work for material reward. Whereas kids who are given maybe a little reward but mostly focused on the intrinsic joy of doing something, they're going to be maybe more likely to stick with something because they're doing it for an internal reason, for a reason that's important to them.